Okay. Have you ever been in that situation where you're kind of like, you're about to talk to someone new?
Yeah.
Yeah, like at a networking event or even, just standing in line at the grocery store.
Hmm.
And that little voice in your head is like, okay, what do I even say to this person?
Yeah.
Especially if you're learning English, that voice might be like extra loud, I think.
I think so. It can be intimidating.
But we've all been there, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's a universal kind of human experience.
For sure.
So we've been looking at different ways to connect better with people and like kind of build that confidence.
Yeah.
And today we're doing a super deep dive into how to actually like start and keep those conversations going.
Yes. With people you don't know.
With people that you don't know.
It's a great topic. And we have a really cool, kind of a unique pairing of sources for this one.
Yeah, tell me about the sources a little bit.
So we have one that's very practical, very down to earth. It's a transcript of a YouTube English lesson that focuses on giving learners phrases that they can use right away to start conversations.
Nice.
And then we also have a more general discussion about the art of conversation.
Interesting.
So kind of a broader perspective on the whole thing.
So the mission for this deep dive is to give our listeners some solid, actionable tools, right?
Exactly, yeah. Phrases you can use, strategies you can implement.
Like, we want you to finish this episode and be like, okay, I feel more prepared
Yes, more confident to go out there and talk to people.
to actually go and do it.
Yeah, make those connections.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit.
Right.
So let's say you're face-to-face with someone you've never met before.
Yeah.
Where do you even begin?
Well, both of our sources kind of point to the same starting point,
Okay.
which is being observant of your surroundings.
Okay.
And the YouTube transcript, it gives this really relatable example
Okay.
of a taxi driver.
Oh, yeah.
Like kind of a classic, a brief encounter.
You hop in the cab and...
Yeah, you hop in the cab and there's that opportunity for connection.
Right.
So the taxi driver in the example, he starts off with the most basic thing, right?
What's that?
Where to miss.
Okay.
Getting the practical stuff out of the way.
Yeah.
But then he smoothly transitions to, so where are you flying in from?
No, that's so smart.
Right.
It's like using the immediate context to spark that initial connection.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the general conversation guide, it really reinforces this idea of observation, right?
It does.
It talks about paying attention to the weather,
Right.
maybe something that the person is carrying, or even just like the overall vibe of the place you're in.
Exactly.
Like, it's all about finding that little shared reality,
That common ground.
that immediate common ground.
Yeah.
Right.
And we shouldn't overlook the power of a simple hi or hello.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Right. Like that's,
Combined with the smile.
yeah, a smile and like open body language.
Right. Just to make yourself appear approachable. That source really emphasizes that, right?
It does. Yeah.
Like,
Well,
just appearing approachable is a big step.
a huge step. Yeah.
Because I think sometimes we can accidentally like close ourselves off with our body language.
Oh, sure.
Like,
Yeah.
if you're standing there, arms crossed or whatever.
They're not giving off that welcoming vibe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so these little initial gestures, like the greeting, the observation, they're like kind of like opening a door.
Exactly.
But how do you keep that door open?
Yeah, that's the key.
Like, how do you keep that conversation going?
Well, it's all about the questions you ask.
Oh, the questions. Okay.
And both our sources have some really helpful tips here.
Okay.
So, the general discussion, it emphasizes open-ended questions.
So not just the yes or no ones.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ones that can't just be answered with the simple yes or no.
Oh, I see.
Things like, if you're at an event together,
Oh.
how do you know the host?
Oh, okay.
Or, have you been here before? Or even just like a really simple one. How has your day been so far?
Okay.
These are all invitations to share a little bit more about themselves, right?
Oh, yeah, I see.
And to give you a little more insight into who they are.
I like that. Okay.
And then going back to the taxi driver example,
Okay.
we see this in action.
Yeah.
So his question from China
Okay.
might have been a little bit culturally insensitive.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that more later.
Yeah.
But his intention was to learn more about his passenger right.
Okay. Yeah, I see that.
And when she corrected him and said she was on a business trip, he followed up with visiting some local companies that manufacture bathroom products.
Right. Okay.
So it shows that he was really listening to her initial response.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
and he wanted to know more about why she was there.
Right. So it's like that active listening.
Exactly. Active listening and follow-up.
That's so key.
So important.
And the general conversation guide, it really stresses what happens after you ask the question, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not just about throwing out a question and then, like, waiting for your turn to speak again.
Right.
It's about showing that you're actually interested in their response.
Exactly.
So, like, nodding, making little encouraging sounds like, that's interesting, or, oh, really?
Yeah, those little verbal cues that show you're engaged.
Totally. And sometimes, conversations that kind of veer into those potentially sensitive areas.
Yeah.
And the YouTube lesson, it actually gives us some phrases that can help us navigate that a little more gracefully.
Yeah.
I thought this was really cool.
Yeah, me too.
So, like, if you don't mind me saying so.
Yeah.
Okay, that one was really useful.
It is.
So the taxi driver used it right after his comment about the passenger not looking Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
And the YouTube lesson presents it as a way to soften a statement that could sound a bit abrupt or rude.
Right. Like a little buffer.
Yeah, exactly.
To acknowledge that what you're saying might be a little sensitive.
Yeah, and I think what's so interesting about that phrase is that it can go either at the beginning of a sentence or the end of a sentence.
Yeah, you're right. It is versatile.
So you could say, like, if you don't mind me saying so, I just don't think this is the best approach.
Yeah.
Or, hey, you look a little tired today if you don't mind me saying so.
Exactly.
Right. So it's like you're acknowledging that maybe you're being a little bit forward or something.
Yeah. Potentially.
Okay, what was the other phrase that they gave?
Oh, yeah. Excuse me if I'm being a bit nosy, but how old are you?
Okay.
That one's interesting.
Yeah.
It directly addresses the potential awkwardness of asking a personal question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like age.
Yeah, and, the word nosy itself means, like, overly curious.
Yeah. Or asking too many private questions.
So it's like you're saying, I know this might be a bit nosy,
Yeah.
but
Uh-huh.
I'm asking anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. And the YouTube lesson points out that asking someone's age, especially a woman's age, can be a little bit impolite.
It can. Yeah. Especially in like Anglo cultures.
Yeah.
Because there are those cultural norms around, privacy
Mm-hmm.
and, potential ageism and stuff.
So, even though you're trying to soften it
Right.
with that, excuse me if I'm being a bit nosy,
Yeah.
it's still good to be mindful of the other person's comfort level.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, if they don't want to answer,
Right. Respect that.
it's totally fine.
Totally fine.
And then they gave one more phrase.
Yeah, they did.
What was that one?
Don't get me wrong.
Oh, don't get me wrong.
Which basically means like, don't misunderstand my intention.
Okay.
Yeah. And they gave some really good examples of how to use it.
What were the examples?
So, one was like, don't get me wrong. It's not that I think you took my computer. It's just that you were the last one I saw using it.
Okay. Yeah.
Just to clarify, like, hey, I'm not accusing you.
Yep.
Another one was, I do see a few potential challenges with this plan, but don't get me wrong. I still think it has a lot of merit.
Right.
So again, it's like,
Yeah.
I have some concerns, but overall I'm positive.
Right.
And then the last one was, don't get me wrong. I think John's a perfectly nice person. He just sometimes struggles with organization.
Okay.
So it's a way to kind of like offer constructive criticism or feedback.
I see. Yeah, it's like you can say something that might be perceived as negative,
Yeah,
but you're making it clear that your overall intention is positive.
exactly.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about starting the conversation
Right.
and then kind of navigating those sensitive areas.
Yeah.
But like, how do you actually keep a conversation going once you've got it started?
Yeah. Once you've broken the ice.
Right, once you've broken the ice.
The general discussion source has some really great advice here.
Okay.
So one thing they emphasize is asking follow-up questions.
Oh, okay. Follow-up question.
Yeah. So if someone mentions that they just got back from a trip,
Okay.
don't just say, oh, that's nice.
Right.
Dig a little deeper.
Okay.
Ask, where did you go?
Okay.
Or what was the highlight of your trip?
Okay.
Really show that you're interested in what they have to say.
Right.
And it encourages them to share more.
It's so much better than just giving those like generic responses.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like you're showing that you're present,
You're present, you're listening.
but you're listening.
Yeah.
And the general source also talks about the importance of body language.
Yes.
Right.
Nonverbal cues.
Those nonverbal cues.
Yeah.
So like maintaining eye contact, but not in a creepy way.
Right. Not staring them down.
Not staring them down.
Yeah.
Having like a relaxed posture.
Mm-hmm.
Offering those little nods and smiles.
Yeah.
All of those things can make the other person feel more at ease.
Exactly.
And on the flip side, Like if you're standing there with your arms crossed
Yeah.
or, looking around the room,
Right.
it can make the person feel like you're not really interested.
Yeah. Like you'd rather be somewhere else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's so funny how those little things can speak so loudly.
They really do.
Okay, so we talked about body language.
Yeah.
The general discussion also brings up the idea of sharing your own little stories
Yeah.
and experiences. So,
Okay.
like, if someone's talking about a documentary that they watched,
Yeah.
you could be like, oh, yeah, I saw this other one that was similar, and, like,
Yeah.
let's talk about it a little bit.
Yeah.
Right.
Makes the exchange feel more reciprocal.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Right.
Less like an interview.
Less like you're grilling them.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like that give and take.
Exactly.
And the source also mentions this balance between speaking and listening.
Yes.
Right.
So important.
Sometimes we get so caught up in our heads,
Thinking about what we're going to say next.
thinking about what we're going to say next.
Yeah. That we're not actually listening.
Right. You miss what the other person's saying.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's like, you're just waiting for your turn to talk
Yeah.
instead of being present.
Right. And a good conversation is a dance.
Oh, I like that.
Right.
A dance.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we've established that listening is super important,
It is.
but humor can be a really nice touch too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like a little joke
Right.
or a funny observation.
Really?
Like the source gives the example
Yeah.
of someone saying, "It's so hot today, I feel like I'm melting like an ice cream cone."
Yeah.
It's so simple but like relatable.
It is. Yeah.
And it can just lighten the mood.
Yeah.
But as always, it's important to be mindful of what you're saying, right?
For sure.
Like, keep it appropriate.
Keep it light.
Keep it light.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about humor.
Yeah.
What about transitioning between topics?
Oh, yeah.
Because sometimes a topic can kind of fizzle out.
Yeah. It can run its course.
Or it could be a topic that's like maybe not that interesting.
Yeah. Or maybe a little too sensitive.
Yeah, too sensitive.
Yeah.
So how do you gracefully move on?
Well, the general discussion suggests using observations about your surroundings as a natural segue.
Okay.
So if you're in a cafe, you could say something like, I really like the artwork here. Or, have you been here before?
Okay.
Just to kind of like
Yeah.
shift the focus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the last point that I wanted to touch on was just being really mindful of people's boundaries.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Right. That's so important.
Like if someone seems hesitant or uncomfortable,
Yeah.
give them space.
Yeah. Right.
Don't push them.
Don't push them.
Yeah.
Not everyone is like an open book, right away.
Exactly.
And that's totally fine.
Yeah, some people are more reserved.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So just be respectful of that.
for sure.
Okay, so we've talked about like keeping the conversation going,
Mhm.
but all conversations have to end at some point.
You do.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you end a conversation gracefully and politely?
Yeah, that's a great question.
That's a skill too.
Yeah.
So the general discussion has some advice here.
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, recognize when there's a natural pause
Yeah.
or a stopping point.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe you've both shared a laugh or
Yeah.
the topic has come to a natural end.
Yeah. Okay, so it's that natural lull.
Yeah.
Okay. And then it's always a good idea to express that you enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah.
Right.
Just a simple, it was really nice talking with you.
Right.
Yeah.
It can go a long way.
It can.
And what about summarizing something that you talked about?
Oh, yeah, that's a nice touch.
Yeah, like a friendly summary. So like if you were discussing travel, you could say, it was great hearing about your trip to Italy.
Yeah.
Or something like that, right?
Right, yeah.
It shows that you were listening.
Yeah.
And that you were engaged.
Exactly.
Okay, so if the situation feels right,
Yeah.
the source mentions you can casually suggest staying in touch.
Right.
Mhm.
But be very aware of the other person's reaction.
Exactly.
Like if they seem open to it, great.
Yeah.
But if they're kind of hesitant,
Don't push it.
yeah, just leave it. Leave it at that.
Yeah.
Okay. And sometimes you just have to go,
Yeah.
right?
You have to cut it short.
So in those situations when you need to leave, be clear and direct, but still polite.
Yeah.
So like, I would love to keep chatting, but I actually have to run now.
Yeah.
Or if you're at an event, you could say, I need to catch the next session
Right.
or something.
Yeah, just a little explanation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what about for those conversations that were just kind of awkward
Oh,
or they just weren't clipping?
Yeah.
Happens
sometimes.
sometimes.
Yeah.
The source suggests a very simple, it was nice talking with you. Have a great day.
Yeah. Keeps it positive and brief. Keeps it positive and brief.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot of ground here
Yeah.
in terms of like how to start conversations, keep them going, end them gracefully.
Yeah.
But I want to switch gears for a second
Okay.
and talk about some of the informal language that the YouTube lesson highlighted.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so like, sure thing.
Yeah,
Sure thing. It's like such a casual way of saying like, yeah, okay, no problem.
No problem. I'll do it.
I'll do it.
Yeah, it's very versatile.
Very versatile.
Yeah.
And they gave some examples, like, someone asking to borrow money or requesting an email or...
Yeah. Like, can you send me that email? Sure thing.
Sure thing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, what about born and raised?
Right.
That's another one they mentioned.
Yeah.
So born and raised here means like you were born in a specific place.
Yeah.
And you've lived there your whole life.
You've never moved.
You've never moved. Okay. The good old US of A.
Oh, yeah.
That's another one.
That's a classic.
It's like a very warm and kind of affectionate way to refer to the United States.
It's got that, like, nostalgic feel.
It does.
Almost folksy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the last one they mentioned was, what about yourself?
Oh, yeah. What about yourself?
Which grammatically
It's not correct.
not quite right.
It's not quite right.
Yeah.
But they pointed out that, like, American English speakers use it all the time.
They do, yeah.
So it's like one of those things where like common usage kind of trumps the grammar rules.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you could say something like, I'm going to the park later. What about yourself?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the YouTube lesson also brought up some cultural considerations.
Oh, yeah.
Which I thought was really important.
Very important.
And it goes back to that taxi driver example.
Right.
Remember how he asked about the passenger's age?
Yeah.
They pointed out that that can be really impolite,
Yeah.
especially in Anglo culture.
Especially towards women.
Especially towards women.
Yeah.
And it makes sense, right?
It does, yeah.
Because cultural norms play a huge role
They do.
in how we perceive, certain questions or certain topics.
Exactly. What might be acceptable in one culture
Right.
could be totally taboo in another.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the lesson mentions some other topics that are generally best to avoid
Right.
in small talk.
Especially early on.
Yeah, especially when you're first meeting someone.
Yeah.
So like asking about someone's salary or income,
Yeah, that's a big no-no.
that's a big no-no in Anglo cultures
Mhm.
because it's seen as really personal and private.
Yeah, it can make people feel uncomfortable.
Totally.
Yeah,
And then asking if someone is married can also be tricky
it can be. Yeah,
unless they bring it up themselves.
right.
Because it can feel a little intrusive,
Yeah,
right?
like you're prying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially early on in a conversation. And then lastly, the YouTube lesson gave a brief definition of heritage.
Oh, yeah.
They define it as culture, customs, history.
Yeah.
And it's in the context of the taxi driver mentioning his Colombian heritage.
Right, meaning his family was from Colombia.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like,
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what's the main takeaway for our listeners?
I think the key point is that starting and maintaining conversations,
Yeah.
it's a skill.
It's a skill,
It's not magic.
not magic. It's
Well-
something that can be learned
Absolutely.
and practiced.
Yeah, and improved upon.
And, we've given you a lot of different phrases and strategies.
Yeah.
So, like, even if you just pick one or two
Right.
and start incorporating those,
Right.
it can make a big difference.
It can.
So here's a final thought for you to consider.
Okay.
Think about some conversations you've had recently.
Yeah.
Okay. Were there any moments where maybe you could have used some of these strategies to connect more effectively?
Mm-hmm.
And what's one small thing that you can do differently in your next interaction?
Great question.
Like, I think that's the key, right?
Yeah.
It's all about taking these insights
Yeah.
and actually applying them to your own life,
Absolutely.
because that's how we make those connections.
Yeah.
That's how we kind of
That's how we grow.
grow and build those relationships.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.